Warning: the following show contains intelligent thoughts, well-formulated ideas, and occasional pointless banter. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello everyone and welcome to Hashing Out the Details. I am your host, D.L. Williams. It is Friday, March the 11th, 2022. I do hope you can all be forgiving as this episode is being recorded. I'm just getting over the most god-awful cold. It was one of those things that ran through the house. I hit my young daughter first, probably something you brought home from school. She was out of school for a good 3 days on it and still wasn't even quite recovered totally when she went back. Next up was my wife. She got hammered. Terrible congestion in her sinuses. Couldn't breathe for nothing. Headache, low-grade fever. And right as she was turning the corner back to being up to speed, it hit me right in the head and then right into my chest. Anybody who knows me knows my chest is my weak spot. It's terrible. Everything I get just goes right down to my lungs. Within a day I was wheezing and coughing and just couldn't sleep, couldn't lay down. It's just horrible. But I really couldn't believe how what really was probably just a cold just lambasted all of us. We suffered days. From beginning to end, all of us, it was 3-4 days. And of that 3 or 4 days, you really felt like you were dying for about 2 or 3 of them. It was really quite terrible. But this is actually going to bring me to my first topic we're going to talk about tonight. I'm not the type of person who takes very much at face value, especially when it comes to things in the news. I tend to be the kind of guy who wants to see the source. I want to hear what was said by the original person, as opposed to what somebody is reporting to me was said by someone else. Or when it comes to a lot of these, things like diseases and medical conditions and things like that, I tend to actually read real medical journals, the type of things that doctors actually read. And it's quite interesting, the difference between what appears in the real medical journals where real science is reviewed and published for other scientists and doctors and physicians to gain knowledge of what's happening out there. It's amazing to me how much that can be changed, or at least skewed to fit a particular story that's being presented by the media. And I'm going to give you an example of that. About a year ago, give or take, there was a lot of conversation going on about whether or not, these mask mandates might actually cause some harm to people. That, there was questions about whether or not wearing a mask, as much as we were at that particular time, was healthy or good for people, or whether it can have its own problems. Now, at the time, there was a host of doctors who came out and said, "Oh, it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to affect anything. It's only going to protect you." Remember the slogan forever was, "My mask protects you, and your mask protects me." And it has no adverse side effects. They kept telling us it was just a myth. The whole idea that wearing a mask, you could contain your own bacteria or lower your oxygen levels. I remember that was one that kept coming up. And at the time, they kept saying, "Oh, we've looked into this and no, there's absolutely no harm possible, no harm to come from wearing masks under these circumstances at the level and the consistency that we're mandating and asking people to wear them." That brings us to the current time, and I started actually doing a little bit of looking into a lot of those original articles and some of the ones that have kept being published over time in the major news outlets. And there were a few that, not a few. I would estimate I looked through at least 20 news articles that were posted by major media sources. And I'm talking, the New York Times, I'm talking LA Times, the Tribune, Washington Post, USA Today. These are all major newspaper outlets that posted these statements of safety about these masks, and that science said, it was almost like a catchphrase. Science says that there's no harm to come from these masks and wearing these masks. And when I looked at all of them, and for those of you that know anything about this type of thing, you see an article and they want to cite sources. And I was really quite shocked by the sources that were being quoted or being given credence to. Almost to a paper, there were consistent sightings of source given to the CDC. The Centers for Disease Control was consistently cited as the major source of the information stating that masks were of no adverse, capacity to anybody. And my favorite of them all, and I got it, this one had me actually laughing out loud when I read it. The USA Today article, their big piece they did a few months back, where it was all about how science had debunked all the concerns about wearing masks and the safety of mask wearing. And in the end, if you looked at the article, and it was a very large, very big piece, like a front page article, the sources cited were the CDC, the Mayo Clinic, and Dr. Mike, the YouTube personality. Now, I'm going to go back here and say that the Mayo Clinic's advice on wearing masks was that they should be worn only in moderation and only by the weakest individuals out there. And from a health standpoint, those of the weakest immune system were the only ones that they believed or that they advised should be wearing masks on a consistent basis, and only if they were in very, very crowded circumstances or environments in a high transmission rate area. That was the Mayo Clinic's initial guidance, okay? Now here's where it gets funny. The CDC ordered the Mayo Clinic in May of 2020, to stop giving guidance that only individuals of immunocompromised status or of a immuno-weakened capacity, only they should be wearing masks extensively and only when in highly transmissible environments. So, let's see here. Now the Mayo Clinic, which is cited as one of their sources, only gives the guidance to wear masks consistently when out in public, only gave that guidance because the CDC told them they had no choice, that they had to. And their other source was Dr. Mike, a YouTube personality who rose to fame by being voted sexiest doctor, I believe it was, back in, I think, 2018. Now, don't get me wrong, I think Dr. Mike's a funny guy. I watched a lot of his little video clips where he watches medical TV shows and that kind of, or like shows on TV that would have doctors, and he points out all the things that they're doing that are ridiculous from a legitimate physician standpoint. And they're great entertainment, but he has less than 4 years of actual practice under his belt as a family physician. That kind of gives me cause for concern as to just why his particular statements alone are worthy of being cited as a source for USA Today, a national publication, to be using, their headline, "Mask Myths Debunked," and their only sources are the CDC, which has been giving the guidance from pretty much day one, the Mayo Clinic, which was giving different guidance than what the article was about, which was wearing masks consistently and in all environments, etc., the way we were all guided to, and Dr. Mike, an internet personality, who's not the most seasoned doctor. And let's all be honest here, he's probably simply, parroting the CDC guidance. Let's all be honest, that's probably what he's doing. That gives me a little bit of cause for concern that if you look at all this quote-unquote guidance we've all been given, where's its basis coming from? And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm saying I want to know, where did it all begin? Who's the one who said, okay, here's the facts and the figures, and it points us to think that masks are harmless, and okay, now you go tell the people, and then that information gets passed to CDC, who makes their guidance. I want to know who the guy is that did the ground level research and said, okay, this is safe. And I can't find any, folks. I can't find any, and that concerns me. That maybe this has not been as rock solid as far as from a scientific standpoint. maybe this has not been as rock solid a guidance as we all just assumed it was. Here's where things get a little more interesting. After a great deal of research, I was actually kind of very surprised by what I did come across. And it was not what I expected at all. When I actually looked into the real research that's been done on this, I couldn't find a single published journal or medical magazine article of any kind, like a trade magazine of any kind, that definitively or even mildly stated that they could find no connection or adverse effects from wearing these masks. Now, on the other hand, I did come across quite a bit that said the contrary. I'll give you just a few examples. I was reading in the Guardian, and the Guardian is a trade magazine of sorts for doctors by doctors. It's out of Great Britain. It's published and read pretty much throughout the English-speaking world by physicians and research doctors and scientists. It publishes a lot of studies and other information geared toward the medical community. And in the Guardian, this past January's article, there was an article written by a Dr. Catherine Moore and a Dr. Shahid Marbesti when they're with the University of Arizona College of Medicine. And their article focused on how they were noticing a pattern shift occurring in medical care, and that the battle zone appeared to be in a lot of ways shifting from the emergency rooms and the ICU units to the garden variety family doctor's office. And what they said was that family doctors, now with these mask mandates getting to be lifted across the world, really, they're starting to see a sudden influx of diseases that really didn't move because of the mask mandates. Things like common colds and even RSV and bronchitis and pneumonia, the flu, all those kinds of what we consider to be just standard diseases that we see throughout our lives and that we get exposed to all the time. They've suddenly started seeing an influx of those diseases now that people are being exposed to them again, but the effects are far more impactful than would be expected from those diseases. What they are seeing is people coming down with bronchitis and ending up in the emergency room because of bronchial tubes that are so swollen they can't get air in, despite using your standard inhalers and breathing treatments at home. They're seeing that those aren't even being effective enough to keep them out of emergency rooms where they need more extensive care for something like bronchitis. They're seeing RSV having devastating effects on especially young children who've been wearing these masks at a time when they're ordinarily getting exposed to these things and building their immune systems. Another thing they came across was that a disease many of us know very well and intimately, the rhinovirus, which, for those of us who haven't brushed up lately on our clinical terms, is the scientific name for the common cold. They're seeing the rhinovirus having what would amount to be incredibly intensified effect on patients. Instead of the normal, ordinary sniffles or a stuffy nose and maybe a little kind of cough, they're seeing people coming in with complete exhaustion, lethargia, barely able to even get out of a chair, horrendous headache, terribly watery eyes to the point of being unable to see, stuffy noses that are going very, very quickly from simple colds into sinus infections that are just extremely amplified from what would be the ordinary effect of these diseases. And what they are theorizing is that over the last, roughly 2 years, after wearing all these masks for so long, it was wearing the masks had the effect of shutting down transmission of these diseases, but it also had the effect of preventing us from being exposed to them. You have to remember, all of us are exposed to pathogens on a daily basis. Flu viruses, RSV, multiple pathogens. If you look at the back of a Lysol bottle, all the things that are out there, I mean, that's not even all of them. That's just a fraction. But if you think about it, those are the things we're exposed to day in, day out. And our bodies create white blood cells to have at the ready in case we get exposed to that in a strong enough capacity to be infected. Our bodies have a head start. This is what they call herd immunity. Herd immunity does not mean that you cannot get a disease. It means that when you are exposed to enough of that particular pathogen to be infected by it, your body already has a pre-made defense system to fight with that disease and keep it from becoming a ravaging infection. Of course, obviously, most of us end up needing some type of minor medical treatment, antibiotic or something like that, for most pathogens, just to clear them out of our system. We have some level of defense already built up that keeps those diseases from being crippling or possibly even deadly. Now, they are theorizing that without having been exposed to those pathogens for the last couple of years, our immune systems are, and I quote from the article, a bit rusty. They're lacking those initial white blood cells that have been prepared by previous exposure to lesser levels of that pathogen to be on the guard for the next time it comes around to fight it off. That's a concern. That's a concern to them that the family doctors are going to be the ones who get overrun now. That things like the local pharmacy trying to keep stock of medications right now when shipping and things like that are still struggling. Are they going to be able to keep the kinds of medications on hand that will assist with this type of problem? Albuterol, commonly prescribed inhaler, nebulizers, those kinds of, at-home breathing treatment apparatuses. They're concerned that these are going to be in short supply, and that as people start coming down with these amplified versions of common everyday, diseases, and they're going to be struggling to get the proper treatment even in a home environment. The same problem that they saw, 2 years ago, trying to gather enough, ventilators and enough equipment and masks and things like those N95s to allow the medical community in the hospitals to face off with COVID. Now they're concerned that this is going to be a problem at the street level, where you're trying to get the proper, treatments and things like that at home for what would ordinarily be an everyday disease that you didn't need a lot of treatment for. You might need something a bit more extensive now. That was simply an article written by 2 research doctors, but I took it a little step further, and I'm going to give you a couple more examples here, and this just caught me off guard, I'll be honest with you. What I thought was really interesting was I ended up coming across a series of research articles in the Journal of Biological Sciences. Here's one in particular I found interesting. It was co-authored by the ones who did this study, a Dr. Rohan Alif, and a Dr. Surah Al-Tahi, and a Dr. T.D. Baker. They studied a 3-part group. The first group was a group of individuals who refused to wear masks at all during this entire COVID event. The second group wore masks less than 2 hours a day. The third group wore masks at a significantly higher rate of at least 6 to 8 hours per day, which, if you think about it, does most of us in a work environment. It's most of us, if you add in all the time, you spend it in work and in stores and in how many other environments, kids in school and sports, and every time they told you had to wear a mask. When you add all that up, it's certainly, by my estimation, going to be in the 6 to 8 hour and probably well plus that range. And this is what their study found, was that the group that refused to wear a mask had what would be considered a normal standard white blood cell count for the average pathogens found in their particular environments. The second group, which wore the mask for only about 2 hours a day, their white blood cell count was just a touch below normal for those same standard, ordinarily found in their environment pathogens. Then you get to the third group that wore the masks from 6 to 8 hours or more per day. When it was reviewed, their white blood cell count for standard pathogens located within their environment, their white blood cell counts for those were so significantly lowered, they did the tests again because they did not believe the initial results were accurate. In the end, it was absolutely accurate. The group that wore the mask the significant amount of time were found to have essentially a compromised immune system. An immune system which no longer had the blood cells needed to fight the pathogens that were ordinarily found in their living environment. And then there was a study that was published in the British Medical Journal. This one was authored by Dr. Tricia Greenhall out of the University of Oxford, Nuffield Department of Primary Care and Health Sciences, and Dr. Lawrence Brewer out of the University of Edinburgh Center for Population Health Sciences. Their study studied approximately 1,200 individuals, all who wore masks all day long as part of their work environment and their shopping or, public activity environment as well. The results showed that every single one of them, all 1,200, I believe the count might have been something like 1,262 volunteers for this study, it's a big study, were found to have, just like the Journal of Biological Sciences study I just talked about, they were found to have extraordinarily lowered white blood cell counts for the common pathogens of their living environment. They were shown to have oxygen and heart rates affected detrimentally. They were found that the moisture from the masks caused skin infections and a certain level of increased asthma problems. They came up with, at the end of their study, a suggestion, a guidance, if you will, from their end, that in order to be used safely, masks would have to be removed for every 2 hours they were worn for at least an hour to restore normal breathing, heart rate, and moisture levels in the skin and in the bronchial tubes and lungs. That is not what we've been hearing, my friends, at all from anyone. I mean, I saw this on, I think I saw it on Mythbusters or something like it, where they tried to say, oh, the CDC said that there's no harm. Here's the problem. I searched for a long time. I cannot find, my friends, a single study anywhere published that states that they could find no detrimental effects. I couldn't find one. That's not what we've been hearing. It's certainly not what I've been hearing. This takes me to a little different line of thought, and it's this. I've been seeing on TV about these, and I've been following along as well, of course, on the internet, these freedom convoys, the truckers in Canada. When you take this scientific information and look at it objectively, now I'll be honest, I am certainly sure somewhere out there has been some study of some variety done somewhere that says they don't hurt you. The masks have no detrimental effects. So there are obviously going to be two sides to this tale. I'm not saying that these masks are bad, but at this point, I'm no longer saying that I'm sure they're good either, or that they were entirely good for us. They were good for stopping and preventing the spread of COVID, but they were possibly detrimental to us in other ways. And it certainly leans some credence to the argument that the truckers and these freedom riders and convoy individuals and these protesters have been laying out there. They simply want the freedom to do what they feel is best for them. And when I look at the science that I'm following here, that I'm coming across on this subject, I can't really put up a legitimate argument, because if somebody's telling them they have to do something that could be detrimental to them, I believe they probably do have a right to say no. I'm going to take my chances, and I do not wish to cause harm to myself. I think people should have the right to make their own choice as to what is best for them. I can't really argue it. So, I don't know what other people think on this matter. I'm going to say that I'm not going to come down on one side of the fence or the other. That, everything's 100% good or 100% bad. Because, of course, I don't believe that. I don't believe virtually anything in the world is 100% good or 100% bad. It's very rare you come across those black and white situations. Virtually everything's a shade of gray. I mean, anybody objectively can realize that. One final comment I'm going to make on this before moving on to other subjects today is I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but after having researched this so extensively and without being able to find any verifiable data used by the CDC to create its guidance, it would almost appear, and I certainly hope that this is not the case, but it certainly gives the appearance of the CDC trying to dictate what is science based on whether or not it came through them, as if they are the authors and the definitive scientific source regarding infectious disease in regards to this country, the United States. I almost hear in my head a commercial on television that goes something to this effect. Hello, we would like you to know that masks have absolutely no adverse effects. Wearing them for extensive periods of time have been shown definitively and categorically by science to have no adverse effects in any capacity to anybody, and to wear them as we guide you. This message has been brought to you by the Center for Disease Control.
We are science. Dum bum 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 bum.
I'm going to take a moment here just to catch my breath, and we'll continue, and we're going to talk about springtime. Can't you wait for the nice weather? Talk to you in just a moment. Okay, and now we're back. Thank you for giving me a chance to take a drink and get myself together. Springtime is that lovely time of year when we can all finally crawl out of the holes we've been shacked up in for the last several months. The warm weather starts to break just a little bit. We see the ice go and the leaves start to pop. And it's a good time to be alive. It really is. It's the season of life. What is springtime going to bring us this year? I can tell you I'm happy about one thing. It's going to bring us baseball, folks. If y'all didn't hear it, they got a deal done. The boys of summer are coming back where they belong, to the field. I can't wait to hear the crack of the bats, the smacks of the mitts. I want to hear that organ playing up there in the stadium, and I want to scream charge. So let's have some fun and watch some baseball this spring. As you can tell, I'm a happy guy about this news. Hope you all are too. Now, springtime for me really is one major thing beyond baseball that's a big, big part of my life, and it's gardening. I was raised in a gardening family. I probably knew how to plant seeds before I could use a knife and fork. My grandfather was a tomato master. He knew how to grow a tomato like nobody I've ever known. I'm not as good as him, but I learned from the best, and I do try. My yard is not the biggest yard, but I maximize what I try to do out there. From a landscaping point of view, I've started creating something of a fruit alley. It's along one of my fence lines. I have gooseberry bushes, strawberries. I am this year planting blackberries and raspberries. My intention in the future is to add in blueberries as well. I don't think I'm going to do that this year. I think I want to just concentrate on getting the blackberries and raspberries to settle in and grow and get them started. I'm going to try a few new things this year. I always grow what I'm going to call my standards, which are green beans, because in this house we eat a lot of green beans. We are big green bean fans. There is nothing more flat out calming. It's better than Prozac. Sitting in the kitchen snapping fresh green beans. There is something so pleasant to that. I just enjoy it. I enjoy getting them ready. I love growing them. I love cooking them. I don't have anything bad to say about the almighty green bean. Going back to my standards, I always go with green beans, tomatoes, bell peppers, alternate corn. Some years I'll do broccoli. This year I'm going to give a shot to Brussels sprouts. That's something I've never grown before. I'm going to give it a try. I live in what gardeners call Zone 6. I'm in northern Pennsylvania. We only have about a good solid 5 month, maybe 6, depending on the cold hardiness of the plant, growing season here. Really, our growing season is the middle of May until about the middle of October, end of October, depending on how fast the frost sets in. So I can't grow things like big, watermelons, things that need a lot of heat and a long growing season. Anything over 100 to 110 day growing cycle probably isn't going to make it unless you have your own little greenhouse, which I don't really have room for, but oh, but I love it. This year I'm going to insist upon help from my kids. They're the ones who insist I keep doing this every year, so I'm going to allow them the privilege of getting out and digging this year. I'm getting too old for that sort of thing. It's not good for the back, but when you're young, you can do all that stuff no problem, right? So I've generally stick with what you would consider to be natural soil amendments, things like manure, and I use compost, things of that nature to build up the nutrients in the ground. So we're hoping that I can get a good crop going of beans again this year. Saves us a lot of money on vegetables, trust me. I'm thinking about some other things I might want to try growing in the future. Anybody out there got any suggestions? Any ideas on things you think I should try to grow in a relatively northern climate? I'll take any suggestions, and maybe if I pick something you throw at me, I'll talk about it on a future show. When springtime comes, there's one more thing that comes with it, and it's the beginning of the pop movie season. These are the movies that are not going to be out for Oscars, folks. They're the movies that are simply there to entertain and get us to shell out big bucks for a seat and popcorn. That's pretty much what they're giving us. The right to sit in front of a giant screen and eat popcorn. In a perfect world, get your eardrums blasted out by some very powerful speakers. So, I'm going to talk about not just movies I'm looking forward to in the next couple of months, or actually maybe even a year or so. I'm first starting out with 3 movies that are upcoming that I wouldn't go see if you paid me. I'm going to start out with a remake. Oh, big shock there, a remake, right? It's about the only thing that ever comes out now. Cheaper by the Dozen, the remake. If you take a look at this, it is just another complete rehash of a movie that was already done probably to perfection by Steve Martin, probably about 20 years ago now. It is an attempt to recreate that movie with a quote-unquote blended family, a black and a white couple who have their own kids combined into this marriage, kind of like a yours, mine, and ours type situation where they're going to be all under one roof and cheap. It's a Cheaper by the Dozen remake for 2021, I suppose you might say. And really, the only thing they're changing is the ethnicity of the kids and the couple. That it has no value for me. I have no need or desire to see this movie. Maybe there is a crowd for this out there somewhere, but I just don't see the point in making a movie that's already been done, pretty much perfectly. Why do we need to see somebody change it just to change something and put the movie out there and hope that the title drags some people in to throw, their money down? I'm looking at it. I watched the trailers. There's nothing about it that seems appealing to me. I would rather just go on Amazon or Netflix and watch the original and be entertained. I don't need to see somebody remake a movie that was done to perfection just to change the color of the people in the movie. You can make any movie you want with with that premise. Why have to be a remake of a movie that was already done perfectly? You don't need to do the same movie over just to make a point about race. That's foolishness. This brings me to the second movie that I have absolutely no desire to see. I don't know why this movie was allowed to be greenlit. I have a hard time with the idea that there is enough of a fan base after what they did in the last one. But there's apparently Sonic the Hedgehog 2 coming out. Anyone who grew up with Sonic the Hedgehog as a video game, and those of us who did, cannot look at that little blue character and not hear ding 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 in their heads. They can't do it. It's just part of the history. We grew up playing that video game, and Sonic had a certain look and a certain characterization. I watched about 45 minutes of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie from a couple of years ago and shut it off. I can't do it. Nope. Couldn't do it. There was something, and even Jim Carrey couldn't save it. It just, every part of it felt wrong to me. And I'm not alone, because I talked to a lot of other parents whose kids sat down to watch that movie, and the parents, it hurt them. They're like, nope, this ain't working. This is not working. To rehash this, to remake this into a movie, or to, excuse me, not remake, but to make this into a movie, you have completely missed the point of what this character's legacy and energy was about. It had no reason to be a Sonic the Hedgehog movie where they land in our world. It just didn't need to happen at all. And that brings me to the third movie I have absolutely no desire to see whatsoever. And I'm going to tell you folks, this movie hurts. I encourage you, if you don't know about this one, to go to YouTube and look up the teaser trailer for Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers, the movie. That's all I can say. If they would have sat down and made a movie based on the cartoon universe that many of us grew up with, and I loved Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers when I was 10 years old. I still believe it probably had arguably the best theme song to a cartoon ever. Arguably, I use that word very strongly. Arguably the best theme song. DuckTales, Thundercats, they're still up in the argument there, but that theme song was great. Okay, and the show was fantastic. It really was. It was fun, and the thing about it was that it took itself seriously. It was a cartoon that understood. The kids watching it took it seriously. Like, to kids, this show was a real adventure. Go and watch the trailer for Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers movie. It is so meta, my head hurts just looking at it. They make it out like, according to the trailer, Chip and Dale, after Rescue Rangers the cartoon, went their separate ways, and now it's 30 years later, and they need to get back together. But the problem is, I believe it was Chip, he's gotten a modern day upgrade, so he's in CGI. But Dale is still in 2D cartoon form. And guess where they are? In the real world. And it's just another lambasting of a cartoon that a lot of us really, really loved as kids. The problem I have with these, I've seen this now with Garfield. I've seen it with Alvin and the Chipmunks. They are making these movies with a double purpose. They're making them to appeal to today's children, but they're also making them with a purpose of a nostalgia, but nostalgia with a wink, and in my opinion, a lot of times, a wink and a middle finger at the parents who watch this stuff as kids. And that's a problem for me. A lot of folks I know, especially a lot of guys I know, when the first Michael Bay Transformers movie came out, they were absolutely nauseated by it. You want to know why they were nauseated by it? It wasn't the 4 billion explosions. It wasn't the fact that you couldn't hardly tell which robot was one from another, because they all looked like they were the same. It wasn't that bothered everybody. You know what bothered everybody? What bothered everybody was that in the end, the humans saved the day. All of us who watched the Transformers as kids know the humans were inconsequential. They had no meaning to the story. They certainly weren't going to save the day. The Autobots had to save the day. The Decepticons had to be the bad guys who were out to destroy and rule the world. The humans had no say in any of it. And the fact that they made the humans the big heroes of the story absolutely enraged the real fan base of Transformers, the 80s kids, the ones who grew up on it. Which is why if you go back and watch the second movie, guess who saves the day in the end there? All the humans have lost. They have no chance. Optimus Prime takes on everybody and devastates them and saves the world. It was a apology to the fan base. I really believe that. They have never said that out loud. I have never heard Michael Bay address it, but I'm telling you, that was an apology to people like me who actually pay for the ticket for their kid to go and see that movie. It was their way of saying, we're sorry for insulting you and a franchise that's special to you. Okay, I'm done on my rant. I'm done talking about things I don't want to see. Now we're going to talk about what I do want to see. And hopefully you'll agree. If you don't, that's cool. Watch what you want to see. I can't wait for Doctor Strange 2. I am absolutely waiting for this. I will tell you that I think at this point we are all getting sort of oversaturated in Marvel material. 2020 put a lot of things on the back burner, so this last year we have had, in this last, I'd say 18 months, we have had Marvel stuff coming out, you know, like a just rapid fire, one movie after another, after another, after another, and it's getting hard to keep up with. I'm at the point now, I think I've even lost track. If you look at it with the Eternals and all the Marvel TV programs that are being, you know, laid out on Disney Plus, it's getting harder and harder to keep track of all the stuff that's going on. But I'm trying, and when I can't actually sit down and devote the time to it, obviously I'm trying to keep track online of the updates and the recaps and all that kind of stuff, so at least I have an idea what's going on going into this next movie. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be real good, to be honest. The second movie I am really looking forward to, kind of a surprise to me. Found it to be a really interesting movie they're making. Now, this is another remake. Big shock again, of course. But it's a movie I didn't really anticipate being the type of movie that Hollywood would be thinking, gee, this sounds like a moneymaker. And this is the movie Firestarter. Now, if anybody's ever seen this, it was a very early career movie for Drew Barrymore. She was just above the age of a little girl. It was after her time in E.T., but before she had really gotten overly popular. She started as this young girl who had psychic powers that the government was after, obviously, to harness, and you know, obviously they were trying to find her and take her captive. And it's based on a Stephen King story. And it's one of those stories that's very unique, different. And it's not a movie that has a huge fan base. It's one of those movies that if you've seen it, you'll remember it, and you probably really liked it. But it wasn't a movie that I'm not going to say hasn't stood the test of time, because that's not right. It's a great movie to watch. It's highly entertaining. It's an extremely different kind of story. Kind of like Carrie, but not, obviously, with Stephen King being behind both. But Firestarter doesn't cross my mind as being a movie that I would think to remake. But they did remake Red Dawn a couple of years back. And while, of course, I still find the original to be far superior, if you'd never seen the original, the Red Dawn remake wasn't bad. If you never saw the original, you'd be fine. You'd probably think it was a great movie. But Firestarter, on the other hand, I think it's going to fall in that same category. But the trailer for this looks really interesting. I think they've done some different things in this movie than in the original. I think they've fleshed out a few things and added in a couple of little tidbits that you never saw in the original film. Some different kind of characterizations and things that weren't in the original story. It looks like they may have accidentally tripped into something that I think that might actually be a pretty good movie. I have high hopes that it's going to be enjoyable. I'm going to get to it. I believe the release date for that's in July. I'm going to try and catch that. Now we're getting to the ones I really want to see. I have been waiting for the next movie for 30 years plus, and that is Top Gun Maverick. That's right, I am a huge Top Gun fan. I have loved that movie since the first time I saw it when I was about 6 years old. No other movie takes you in the cockpit like that. There is something so... It probably ranks as one of the great guy movies. It's just a lot of good music and a lot of what you might now call semi-toxic masculinity. It's a lot of fast jets and explosions. And there's nobody can tell me, no guy in the world could say they didn't have a tear in their eye when Goose died. I'm sorry. It's probably one of the most heartbreaking moments in pop cinema history. I am really looking forward to see this movie. I have high hopes for one reason, and that's Tom Cruise wouldn't have made it if it wasn't going to be something good. The guy, he's got enough firepower and star power behind him right now. He doesn't make very many bad movies. And he put a lot into this one, from what I understand. They were able to do something I didn't really anticipate and get the U.S. Navy to once again allow them access to fighter jets and that type of thing. And I think the idea of this movie being a continuation of the story from that original movie, maybe I'm just a fanboy at heart, but I'm really hoping this will give us one last, Need for Speed moment. We'll see what happens, I suppose. Of course, we also have Jurassic World, which is being billed as the grand finale to the Jurassic franchise. It boasts the return of the original Big Three from Jurassic Park, along with the stars of the last couple of films, the Jurassic World series. I believe this has the potential to be something good. I always enjoy Sam Neill. Laura Dern's a great actress, and can anybody not like Jeff Goldblum? I mean, you really can't. That's not true. I felt like he was phoning it in on that Independence Day sequel, hoping he just took a paycheck. But that brings me to after the summer. I am really looking forward to The Flash, coming out, I believe, in November. That's what it's scheduled for at this moment. These things seem to bounce around like ping pong balls anymore. I find it fascinating that both the MCU and the DC universe of, film universe are trying to use the multiverse idea as their way to breach the gaps between all the different series that have been out there and produced over the years of different, like the different Batmans, the different Supermans, the different this, the different that. When you get over to the MCU, you have the different versions of the X-Men possibly coming in. Different Spider-Man, that's been a big one. We all saw that in Spider-Man No Way Home. The three different Spider-Mans joining forces. And that multiverse philosophy, allowing them to pull a real coup with The Flash and bring back the one and only Michael Keaton as the aged greatest detective in the world, Batman. I am stoked for that. I really am. Everybody knows that if you grew up in that time span before the Christian Bale Batman series, Michael Keaton was Batman. Michael Keaton is Batman to a whole generation of folks. To see him don the cape again is going to be really fun. And I can't wait for that. I don't even care if he just simply has a 5-minute cameo. I'll pay the $12 to go see it just to see Michael Keaton come back as Bruce Wayne Batman. That's going to be a little nostalgia trip for me. And that brings me to my final movie I can't wait to see. And this is over a year away. Just got word. It was reported that it's finally finished filming. It's in the can. Indiana Jones Part 5. I know. Harrison Ford, by the time this movie hits the theaters, will be 80 years old. I know that. I'm sure he's not doing his own stunts these days. But then again, the guy seems to be able to crash a plane and walk away from it. I am so hoping that this movie is everything we hope it to be. I did not mind Kingdom of the Crystal Skull the way a lot of people did. I thought there were certain scenes that just had no reason to be there. I thought that they tried too hard to make it was like Indiana Jones playing Indiana Jones in a movie meant to be like Indiana Jones. It just didn't quite. Not every little part felt as serious as it needed to be. It felt a little light for an Indiana Jones movie. I mean, I know there were never ultra heavy, heavy dramatic material, but I don't know. Just something about in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull where they get to the temple and it looks like something, off a Nickelodeon game show. Just felt a little let down by it. And let's all be honest, Aliens had no reason to be in an Indiana Jones movie. It's just not. So, I'll let that go where it goes. Supposedly this movie is now finished filming. It's ready to go. They're editing it together now. It is not due for release till I believe July of 2023. For the next year and several months, I'm just gonna have to bide my time and hope that Harrison Ford can stick the landing on this career and go out like the champ he's been for 40 years now. Crack that whip one last time, save the world from some mystical danger one last time, and ride off into the sunset one last time. For all of us who cheered him on movie screens and TV screens and comic books and video games since 1980, I really hope this is the one that finishes it, and I hope he goes out in a blaze of glory. And I really hope they don't kill him. Because let me tell you, if they do that, I am done with Hollywood. I'm just finished. Well, my friends, I believe that's about all the time we've got for tonight. I hope you've been informed. I hope you've been entertained. And I hope more than anything that you've gotten something to think about. I don't care if you agree with anything I say. I just want you to have things to think about, to question, and to learn more, because that's the best thing any of us has in this world, is our ability to learn and be smarter tomorrow than we were when we got up today. But before I go, I would like to again mention a charity which is near and dear to my own heart. Big Brothers Big Sisters of America has been in existence for over 100 years, providing mentoring to youth in need. You can learn more about them by visiting www.bbbs.org. That's www.bbbs.org. I was a big brother. I had a big brother. I enjoyed the program immensely, and I encourage you to please consider them for your next charitable donation. From myself to all of you out there, this has been Hashing Out the Details with D.L. Williams. Take care.